think you can, coming from competitive CrossFit background, and then would you consider yourself a bodybuilder now by sport?
I mean, I'm as much as a bodybuilder as I am a guy who runs 10Ks on the weekend and, does Zumba class.
A
Like,
functional athlete then, yeah.
yeah,
So,
pretty much. Like, I would say that, you know, for me, bodybuilding was a way to build knowledge and credibility
mhm,
because there's a lot of fakers in the industry.
yeah,
Okay. So let me give you some context. I have plenty of experience and a really wide resume in CrossFit, right? Competed at the CrossFit Games, coached CrossFit Games champions for a decade, taught 400 seminars, like lived it, breathed it, every end of it, right?
yeah,
And a lot of people know me and they're like, oh, Dave really knows this stuff, it's
mhm,
pretty good visibility. But in the world of bodybuilding, I was at the bottom of the totem pole. Like nobody
mhm,
knew who I was. And to tell you the truth, when I started, I had no fucking idea what I was doing. But I realized that for me to understand how to do this, it's going to take more than me reading a book on bodybuilding or
mhm,
hypertrophy training. It's going to take more than, doing, and I got to do some really cool stuff because I had connections and some visibility. I was able to connect with like really great minds in hypertrophy training, like Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, who's like the world authority on hypertrophy science. And I was able to
mhm,
get on calls and conference and try to mentor under him a little bit.
mhm,
But being able to, in Colorado, go over to Armbrust Pro Gym. And if you guys don't know Armbrust Pro Gym, it's the home of the 7-time Mr. Olympia champion, Phil Heath, pretty well-known guy in bodybuilding.
yeah,
It just happened to be in my backyard
that's
in
awesome.
Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and
Mhm,
and so I found this place and I walked in the first day and I said, "Hey, I'm a CrossFitter and I want to compete in bodybuilding." And I got laughed at. And it's the best thing that could have happened to me because I already knew it was going to happen.
yeah,
I already knew because I know how to train hard. If you can point me in the right direction and show me, how to get from A to B, I'm
right,
going to get there. So, it was exciting for me to have to go through the ranks and prove myself, not just in the gym and training, but also on stage and
mhm,
being able to show that like I can change if I'm going to tell you I can change your body, I should know how to do it to myself and other people first,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
need to kind of go through that to build the knowledge, and a lot of it, like I've learned and picked up a lot like right off the bat. But even then, there's a lot of kind of fine tuning and finessing on the side of nutrition and training and lifestyle, like so many layers to kind of peel out and
Mhm,
and work through. But then getting to compete in bodybuilding was my opportunity to really kind of prove myself in the sport and to build that knowledge and credibility. And from there, over the course of those 3 or 4 years I spent at Armbrust Pro Gym, I worked with some amazing trainers. I got to train with world champion bodybuilders, and I just tried to be a sponge
yeah,
and look at it not just through the lens of bodybuilding, but look at it through the lens of what does this mean to a CrossFitter? Like we're doing these like really cool methodologies and complexes and using these principles. What does that mean to an athlete who's not exclusively training for aesthetics, but still wants to leverage the ability to grow maximum muscle?
mhm,
And so a lot of what I do is translating advanced bodybuilding methodology to people training in their garage gym with a barbell and a dumbbell
mhm,
and replicating machines and finding ways to maybe do these principles in a slightly more functional way just
yeah,
by using functional movements in addition to some of the cool isolation stuff that has lots of utility.
mhm,
So I mean, it's kind of that whole process of it served a purpose for me. And one of the things that I really like to do is, and it's been a while, but I'll go through a period where like I'll do a show or a couple shows. I'll have a goal for myself. Like right now, I'm kind of at that level where I want to be like a top national level bodybuilder when I go on stage. So it takes
mhm,
a lot of preparation. But I don't feel the need to have to do that every single year. Like I'll go for a while, 1 or 2 years. It's going to be 2 years before the next time I step on stage, where I can just kind of focus on my business. And then going back and competing again, I always learn something. I always learn
mhm.
something about myself or something more about, bodybuilding or things that I can apply to my athletes. And it's nice to walk the walk and not just be the one saying, hey, you should do this, but also being the one doing it.
Yeah, trial by fire, right? Like
Exactly.
continuing to stay in the fire to actually be able to translate that. So do you think that as a competitive CrossFit athlete, you can you can utilize that hypertrophy training and still, because like I know that too, if you gain too much muscle mass, right, it can hinder your performance. Is there a way to bridge that? Is that something that's able to be done, or is it kind of a focus of functional, movement and bodybuilding, along or competitive CrossFit?
Well, one of the main questions I had to navigate when I started all this stuff was figuring out the context of how does this apply to the functional fitness athlete? How does this apply to the person that's not only interested in aesthetics, but still wants to be able to run and jump and do athletic things and hold their own in all these different arenas, kind of like this idea of physical culture. And I don't view what we do as a bodybuilding program or a CrossFit program. We're something completely different. We're like right in between. And for a lot of folks, I think that like you have to understand the reason why you would integrate this into your training program. Like, what would be the purpose for doing, using advanced hypertrophy methodology in your training program when you're just doing kettlebell swings and pull-ups and stuff like that? And there are three main reasons. The first reason is orthopedic safety. Okay. So hypertrophy by its nature is building up the body, increasing the cross-sectional size and strength of muscles, increasing your contractile potential, but also fortifying critical areas of breakdown like the shoulders and the knees and the back that tend to break down and take the brunt of force when you're pushing it to the limit, when you're redlining. So simply by just doing this, it's a great way to build orthopedic safety just by not going as fast as you can or as heavy as you can always, but just focusing on building up tissue. And I think for me, that was originally the most important thing for me. And most rehabilitation programs are hypertrophy training.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing submaximal weights under larger volume, under control, and building positional strength. So, I mean, that's the first one. The second one is actually the performance side of things. CrossFit athletes, once you're at a certain level, right? And I'll use myself as an example. When I started doing CrossFit, every time I go in the gym, it would be like a PR. Like it was like the honeymoon period. I'd never done an overhead squat before. And 6 months later, I'm doing it with 135. Like, you're learning positions and patterns. You're learning these really intricate ways of working from core to extremity and coordinating the brain with the muscles to be able to maximize efficiency, using momentum and patterns that are unparalleled for creating power. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But at a certain point, those neurological adaptations hit a peak where, trying to use your software, trying to improve the software and how you communicate with your body or get into better positions, like you're not going to get much more out of it. And this is highlighted best by a model we use when we were teaching CrossFit level ones called the list of the 10 general physical skills. And there are things like cardiorespiratory endurance, stamina, strength, and flexibility, power, speed, coordination, accuracy, agility, and balance. The first four at the top, cardiorespiratory endurance, stamina, strength, and flexibility, cardiorespiratory endurance, stamina, strength, and flexibility are biological adaptations, right? Meaning that there's a physical change in the tissue. And you can see things like increased mitochondrial density, for increased aerobic capacity, increased muscle belly size, increased muscle belly length, but there's like a physical change in the tissue.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom four, coordination, accuracy, agility, and balance, they're neurological adaptations, right? So that's like, how well can your brain coordinate with your body to get the most return out of the minimum effort?
Yeah.
And then the middle two, power and speed, are influenced by both. Well, my point is, like, once you get a couple of years in a CrossFit, you already have the patterns and the positions down. You know how to cheat really well. You do tipping pull-ups, you're kind of bouncing the deadlift off the ground, you know how to get in the right position when you're Olympic lifting. So it's not really in those neurological components that you stand to gain the most ground, but it's actually in the biological ones. And the biggest one is just increasing the size and strength of the machine so that you can apply that very high contractile potential, because you've got sophisticated software in your head. You know how to get the most out of your body. What you need now is a larger machine to exact that potential. Mm-hmm. And so that's a performance side of things. And then the last one, which honestly is how I sell the most programs, is being able to love what you see when you look in the mirror. It's like the personal gratification that you get. Like if getting a muscle up or a PR deadlift, like that's awesome, that's cool. But to me, being able to go in the gym day in and day out and see the objective and subjective progress of like, wow, I'm getting leaner, I'm getting more muscular, I can see more separation between my abs, like building that superhero body is probably the most rewarding process for most of my athletes, and that's why they come back. Because that is a big piece for them. It's just they don't want to only focus on that. They still want to feel like an athlete, although their ambitions are not necessarily to like train to go to the CrossFit Games. Does that make
Right.
sense?
That does make sense. We're in somebody's, training year. Does it make sense to fit this kind of program in their cycle? Because it sounds like it makes sense to go through, a hypertrophy cycle once a year, even if it, is just a mesocycle of three months maybe, or 12 weeks, right? When is a
Yeah.
good time to fit this in?
Well, I think the bigger question is, what do you want and how fast do you want it?
Hmm.
Because that will really dictate the training and nutrition protocols. Originally, when I started doing this stuff, I started by incorporating hypertrophy finishers. So I would do my CrossFit workout, and I had to modify the CrossFit. I had to keep it like light and easy, kind of
Right.
scaled level CrossFit. And then afterwards, I would pick a body part and I would annihilate it with hypertrophy training. And it would be the kind of thing where it's like, maybe we did a workout like, I don't know, Diane with like deadlifts and handstand push-ups. And then I finished with a bunch of auxiliary shoulder work. And actually, I've got the book right here. This is the second version of the Hypertrophy Finishers Bible, where it's just an index of these 10-minute hypertrophy finishers that you can put after your workout
Oh, that's
and
cool.
compare. And what's nice is like, that's not really invasive or disruptive. You can still like go to your affiliate and do the class programming,
Hmm.
but then pick a body part you want to work on. You're like, hey, I really want to bring my legs or my shoulders or my biceps or my lats up. And you can hit that after the workout, instead of just doing the regular stretch down, cool down. That's your extra auxiliary hypertrophy work. And that's kind of where I started with this stuff.
Hmm.
But then that'll only get you to a certain point, right? Because, there is this concept of the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands, which is really opposite to this idea of GPP, general physical preparedness, right? Or,
Hmm.
or, or maybe not so much, but like, I guess with said training principles, the idea is, if you want this adaptation, you need to be focusing on this type of work, right?
Right.
So if you want increased muscle size, the majority of your training should focus on these training principles, where this is where you live most of the time. It doesn't mean that you can't go and visit other places, but this should look like the meat on your entree, right? When
Hmm.
you're doing it. And so I started taking some of the more advanced stuff that I had learned in my bodybuilding career and applying it to our program, Muscle Anarchy. And Muscle Anarchy, it's kind of, I love it because it takes some of the principles of CrossFit, but a lot of the advanced bodybuilding methodologies and kind of melds them together. So the program is about 75% of it is hypertrophy training.
Okay.
And it's a traditional hypertrophy training split where you've got legs, chest, back, shoulders, and arms Monday through Friday. So that might take, let's say, somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour of just pure hypertrophy training. And then within the hypertrophy training, there are components like pre-fatigue exercises, heavy mechanical loading, concentration work, metabolic stress work that really hit hypertrophy from all angles. And every week, unlike a traditional linear periodized program where it's like you're doing the same movement, the same reps every week, and you just try to put on more weight or you try to do another rep, it's undulating periodization where we have a framework of, like, let's say on our leg day, there's a hinge-based movement, there's a squat-based movement, there's a single leg movement, but it changes week to week. So you're
Hmm.
still getting that component of variability that I personally love and find a lot of value with my athletes, because it's a way to circumnavigate injuries and build versatility. A lot of the injuries we're seeing are just overuse injuries. It's just like back squat, back squat, back squat, clean, clean, clean. So we'll do all kinds of variations where, like, one week it might be a deadlift, the next week it might be a rack pull, the next week it might be a sumo deadlift off of blocks. It's like always kind of undulating in that regard
Yep.
within those categories of pre-fatigue, heavy mechanical loading, concentration work, and metabolic stress. And then at the end of each day, there is a conditioning piece. And the conditioning piece is like the kind of conditioning that I wouldn't be afraid to do. So a lot of it is just some grunt work, air bike, ski erg,
Yeah.
calisthenic work, dumbbell work, kettlebell work, but nothing that's going to be really high skill and nothing that's going to be really heavyweight. Because the thing
Yeah.
about hypertrophy training is it's incredibly damaging. When you do good hypertrophy training, you're creating all these micro tears and damage to the sarcolemma of the muscle fibers and even the contractile components like the myosin and actin bonds that help those muscles shorten. So if you pile more damage on top of damage, it's hard to recover from that.
Yeah.
So the hypertrophy training is the hypertrophy training, and the conditioning is the conditioning. The conditioning is not meant to be hypertrophy training, and the hypertrophy training is not meant to be conditioning. And I find that that's like really where we get the most value. There are a lot of different programs out there that try to blend a little bit of bodybuilding and CrossFit together. But what they do typically is they end up bastardizing both, where it's not a good conditioning program and it's not a good hypertrophy program
Yeah.
because they're trying to make one the other when really they're best served kind of separately. Does that kind of
Yeah, no, that definitely is good. So
and,
they kind of need to be, if you want to hone in on one or the other, you need to pick one or the other essentially, and then
yeah.
focus on that for a time, which is okay. And you can always
But
go
I mean,
back.
like going back to your question about like when, like
Mhm.
I think most of my athletes, they just stay in muscle anarchy and they maintain their fitness and continue to kind of build muscle.
Mhm.
But for like, let's say a competitive athlete who has a season, like the Open is coming
Right.
and they have this off season. We actually are currently working with CrossFit Invictus, and they're a very popular
Oh, cool.
CrossFit gym. We worked with them a
Yeah.
lot in our competitive days. And we're creating a performance bodybuilding program with them where it's a hypertrophy program for competitors. So unlike the stuff we do in Muscle Anarchy that is like much more user friendly,
Yeah.
if you do need to do the squat snatches and muscle ups and really care about your score at the Open and need to maintain these very high level gymnastic skills, it's going to have skill work and conditioning reflective of that in between some really awesome functional hypertrophy training.
Okay.
So that's kind of on the docket this year. We'll be hosting it on Train Heroic. And, our main program, Muscle Anarchy, I think, for me, it's just getting people to try it out, because once they taste it, it's a lock. It's usually the thing that those people that are program hopping, those folks that are out there that are like, I did HWPO and then I did Mayhem and then I did Proven and I tried Comp Train. And they just kind of ended up with the same result where they really didn't get anywhere, but they kind of ended up just getting hurt. This is really the answer for them, for those athletes that for one reason or another are ready to move on from CrossFit, but not abort it, not completely leave it,
Right.
just have it evolve for them.
Hmm. Definitely. It sounds like, as you said, a great second life for a CrossFit athlete, essentially.
Yeah, it's fun to take, my favorite thing in the world is just the body transformation stuff,
Hmm.
because being able to take somebody who, thinks they know how to eat, they're like, I eat pretty good. I do paleo. I try to keep it clean. I thinks they know how to train. Like I do high intensity training,
Hmm.
and this is where they're at. Being able to show them how much more they have in the tank is so exciting to me.
Yeah.
And we do this. I'm always posting before and afters, because there are so many competing voices in fitness. Like we were talking about how saturated this industry is.
Hmm.
And a lot of them play this zero sum game where like, well, less for you means more for me. So your method is stupid and mine is the only way to do stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you can talk until your face is blue about why your method is cooler and this and that, but nothing speaks louder than a before and after picture. You can't argue with
That's
that. You
true.
know what I mean? Like it's just like
Yep.
the ultimate equalizer. And,
Hmm.
it's like when you say like, well, pop your shirt off and let's see what it actually did. That is, there's no way to argue with that. So we
Yeah.
really try to leverage that process and celebrate and highlight, athletes who want to change their bodies. I tell them, if you want to win, I promise I'll get you there. You have to want it, but
Yeah.
but if you want to win, I'll get you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of them end up, kind of initially doing something like they'll do our 30-day shred challenge where we combine training, nutrition, and some nutrition coaching,
Hmm.
and they'll roll that into like some private coaching. And after they kind of like, wow, I can see my abs better than before, they'll ask
Yeah.
me, hey, I'm kind of interested in doing my first bodybuilding show.
Yeah.
And it's great because you should be able to compete in all areas. Like you should be able to do a CrossFit competition and
Hmm.
a bodybuilding show and a powerlifting meet. Like that's the idea of physical culture. And
Right.
I think that if you want to know how good you could look. Like the question is like, I always wanted to know how good I could look if I just went all
Mhm.
in. Nothing will bring that out more than knowing at a certain date, at a certain time, you're going to be naked on a stage in front of a panel of judges and all your friends and family with a bunch of other good looking muscular dudes trying to
Mhm.
battle it out. That creates a sense of desperation where adherence to the diet and training protocols, not that hard. You know, it's the ultimate motivator. So I
That
always
is a good
encourage
point.
people to try it, like see what you're motivated.
Yeah.
And it also teaches athletes extreme discipline
Yeah.
because you know, as regimented as CrossFits are, there are so many additional layers of discipline with training, nutrition, and lifestyle that you
Mhm.
have to accommodate for. You know, good bodybuilding, it's not about what you're doing in the gym. It's honestly more about what you're doing outside the gym
Oh,
that's
yeah.
going to which way your body's moving. So there are
Yeah.
so many kind of cool things to dive into.
Yeah. Well, and that segues perfectly. I mean, you kind of flowed through those 3 sections I want to talk about. So segueing into nutrition side of it, how much do you weigh? Like, what's your height and weight? Because you've got a great physique, and I'm curious how you eat to maintain that.
I mean, at my peak, I always look at stage weight because
Okay.
stage weight is going to reflect your leanest and your most muscular, right?
Right.
So, you know, my best weight on stage was 237 pounds.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was about at 5.5% body fat. My off-season weight for that had to go up to almost 260 pounds because when you're cutting, you know, when you're cutting body fat, you're also going
Yeah.
to lose a lot of weight. And typically there's going to be somewhere between a 20 and 30 pound difference between your off season weight and your
Mhm.
stage weight.
How tall are
Um,
you?
I'm about 5'11", but
Oh,
you
okay.
know, to get there, it took a long time for me to get there because the
Yeah.
first show I did, I was 205 pounds on stage.
Okay.
So, you know, each year, my first year, I think I went up to like 220 and cut down to 205. My second year, I was almost up to 240 and cut down to like 215. My third year, I was up in the 250s and then cut down into the 220s and so on and so forth. So the idea is like, you know, when you're looking at your career, a lot of people view it in terms of days and weeks and even months when you
Mm,
should really view it as years
mm,
because what you need to kind of consider is over, you know, years or an entire lifetime, how many good quality repetitions can you accumulate with good technique, good intensity, and being in the right energy status conducive to muscle growth, which
mhm.
speaks to the diet, right? So it should be this kind of long progression. It's not one prep, but it's actually the whole, you know, years and years. And I think that
Mm,
consistency is where most people get held up, is because they're always jumping diets or jumping workout programs that they don't get the chance to actually lay down that long-term journey where
yeah.
it's very hard to accomplish anything of substantial meaning.
Mhm. Yeah. I've struggled with that in the past. You know, I see the next shiny thing and want to jump to it, try it out, you know, experiment with it. And you know, it was funny. I had a conversation with my general manager here at the gym. She's also my nutritionist. And I had a friend reach out to me. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna run a 50 miler in Red River Gorge here in December. I was like, ooh, that sounds fun. I'm like, maybe I'll do that too. And then I thought about it a couple of days. I'm like, all right, I'm in. And then I talked to her. She's like, okay, what are our goals right now? I'm like, this, okay. Well, that's gonna take us a ways off that.
Yeah.
So, and that's not including you getting injured potentially, which, you know, I happened to me last time I trained for a marathon. And it, you know, doing Olympic lifting while you're training for a marathon, I don't recommend it. I ended up tweaking something in my calf, and it gave out. Like I was halfway through my long run, about a week or two out from the marathon, and I ended up having to call my wife to come pick me up. Couldn't run anymore.
Well,
So,
I think it's good to do something like really hard every year, you know, have
mm,
some big endeavor you're chasing.
yeah.
It's something you kind of really reach for. But one of the things I talk to my personal athletes about and the guys that I coach one-on-one is this
Mhm,
idea of a baseline. And the baseline is just where you live. You know,
mhm.
when you have a baseline, let's call it from physical biometrics, let's say, you know, how much do you weigh right now?
I'm 6'1", weigh 215. Yeah,
Okay, so let's say 6'1", 215 at roughly, let's call it like 12% body fat.
yeah,
This is your
pretty
baseline. Like
close.
you're comfortable here, right? Right now.
Mhm,
If we wanted to push in one direction, we could probably cut you down to 195 and be
mhm,
down at 7% body fat. If we wanted to push you up, we could probably push you up to 225 and be at 15% body fat. But
mm,
you're kind of just living here. This is your set point.
Yeah.
Over the years, that set point should continually improve with increased muscularity and increased leanness.
Mm-hmm.
So you're here right now. Let's say you go through a period of time where you put on some size and then you cut down, and now your baseline's a little higher
Mm-hmm.
because you have more muscle mass and you are a little bit leaner. And that should kind of be an incremental process of like one step up and then one step back and then one step up and one
Mm.
step back. And if you do that over a long period of time, that's how you end up with people who could just like walk around with lots of muscle and have abs, because, you know, it takes a long time to build that baseline, but the
Yeah.
consistency is what allows for that.
Mm.
And so like, you know, you want to go through from a dietary standpoint, you always want to have some rules and metrics that you're living by. It
Mhm.
can't be like, I'm going to do what I want, I'm going to eat what I want. You're just
Right.
not going to get anywhere. You're not going to be building that baseline, because when you cut or when you bulk, you're going to be pushing yourself. Like you're going to be pushing calories when you bulk. You're going to be in a big deficit and, you know, pushing crazy high amounts of protein when you cut.
Mhm.
But each time you do that, you're building up a higher and higher tolerance to that level of discipline. So even if you go back to a maintenance diet where you're 80% compliant to hold your composition, you're still
Mhm.
getting 80% of the benefit. The problem is when people think of a diet as just like a period of time, when a diet should really be just how you live.
Right. Right. It becomes a lifestyle for you. So what are kind of the ways that you eat when you're focused on just maintaining? You know, are you a high carb guy, low carb guy? Do you just kind of float in the middle? Like what do you see typically working for you?
Well, I mean, there are 5 principles that I always like try to focus on, and within these principles, there's a lot of variability. But the first one is the caloric balance, right? So if we were trying to gain size, we would want to be in a positive caloric balance, right? Eating a little
Mhm.
bit more fuel than our body needs to sustain its current mass. If we were trying to cut, we would want to be in a caloric deficit, so a little bit less than our body needs. So caloric balance is where you can just kind of maintain the weight, maintain the mass. So for me, that's right at about like 3,500 calories just to kind of stay where I'm at, given my activity and my basal metabolic rate. You know, the more muscle mass you have, the higher your metabolic rate is going to be,
Yeah.
because muscle uses energy. So that's the first piece, is like having the caloric balance. And there's lots of formulas we use to try to calculate that, because like your biometrics make a huge difference.
Mhm.
Age, gender, activity level, genetics, like, you know, I usually give people my very best guess, and the majority of the time I get it right. But sometimes it's also, as a coach, understanding like, well, how do they react to it? So,
Yeah.
you know, every time when someone does a check-in with me usually on a weekly basis, the first thing I want to know is their weight differential from last week to this week. Is like, how did
Mhm.
your weight change? Because that'll give me a good idea as to like the caloric balance. The
Yeah.
second piece is being in a positive nitrogen balance, which means you're consuming plenty of protein to sustain your lean muscle tissue. So whether I'm trying to maintain, whether I'm trying to gain or even cut, I'm always trying to get into that positive nitrogen balance, because that's going to be supportive of not just muscle, but also muscle growth. So that's
Mhm.
another really important one. So for me, it either looks like, you know, low carb, high protein, high carb, high protein.
Mhm.
Very seldomly will I go to high fat though. And the reason for that is because in terms of metabolism, fat is going to really slow down your digestion, and it's not going to be really conducive to muscle growth. So for someone in the off season, you don't want to go crazy on fat. You really just want to leverage carbohydrates and protein and try to get the most out of that. And they're generally, you know, it doesn't mean you don't have fat. You're just not eating high amounts of it.
Right.
There's a context for a high fat diet, but the context isn't muscle growth, right? That's not really where it applies. It more applies to things like insulin sensitivity, general health outcomes,
Mhm.
biomarkers. Like that can be, keto diet can be improving on biohealth markers. So with people with like metabolic disorders, that can be extremely helpful. For people with cancer, that's an anti-inflammatory, you know, reducing. I mean, the whole reason why low carb works so well for cancer people is because it reduces all the growth factors in the body, the insulin
Right.
responses, that kind of stuff. So there's a context for that. But, you know, in terms of what we're talking about, we're
Mhm.
usually not going to go crazy with fat. So there's a positive nitrogen balance. The next thing that most people don't consider, and I think this is where I'm remarkably different than most nutrition coaches, is that I heavily prioritize targeted nutrient timing, because this to me is exactly where you can start to break a lot of training and nutrition myths. So the big myth that's out there is that you can't gain muscle and lose body fat. You know, that's kind of like
Mhm.
the big thing. You can't be cutting and gaining at the same
Right.
time. so to speak. And the truth is, like, that's not actually true. You can do it, but you do need to be very strategic about it. And the way you can be strategic about it is by balancing the anabolic signals, where you're trying to stimulate growth factors, like get an insulin response to help shuttle glucose into muscle cells and drive nutrients and replenish muscles and get those growth factors, and catabolic signals, where you're actually trying to reduce the size of fat cells and stimulate a hormone called glucagon that converts stored glycogen back into glucose to raise your blood sugar if you're fasted or if you're in a low carbohydrate state. So, if I'm maintaining, I'm eating carbs, but there are a couple of rules. Outside of a certain window, there are no carbs, right? So this is a way you can hold really good composition, but also be able to grow some muscle in the process. And usually that looks like placing about 3/4 of your daily carbohydrate intake in a 3-hour window before and after your training. Because if you're having it 3 hours before your training, it's going to be in your system, and you'll be very apt to use it when you start lifting or training with intensity. Your muscle's job is to just dispose of glucose. So if your glucose is high going into a workout, that's not a big deal at all. You're not going to store it, you're going to use it. And same thing post-workout. Like, you do want to get an insulin spike post-workout. But if you're spiking your blood sugar throughout the day, you're going to lose that insulin sensitivity, and you start to almost negate that effect. So you want to kind of be really strategic with how you're using carbohydrates. And that, to me, is like the best way. If you're trying to, like, the typical athlete is like, I want to recomp, I want to reduce my fat and gain muscle. That's kind of the really important protocol. And then the last two are training related. It's like, all of our athletes, whether they're cutting or gaining, usually have some representation of fasted cardio in the morning. And the fasted cardio serves us on a number of purposes. Like, one, it energizes you, it stimulates dopamine, helps reset your circadian rhythm. But more importantly, it helps maintain good insulin sensitivity and helps you shrink fat cells. Because when you haven't eaten all night and now you start doing activity, your glucose, your blood sugar, is going to drop a little bit, and that's going to help stimulate glucagon. And you normally, I'll have people do it like some branched chain amino acids, even to amplify that effect to some degree. And if you're bulking, it might just be 10 minutes. If you're cutting, sometimes it goes up to 45 minutes or an hour. But usually there's always some representation of fasted cardio. And in all scenarios, there is that concept of, like, the heavy lifting, like, to be able to grow and maintain lean muscle mass, to be able to, like, really improve your composition, where you're not just eating away at muscle. You have to stimulate muscle to either maintain it or to even grow it in some cases. So you have to have kind of that intense, voluminous lifting session where you're going to try to dispose of all that glucose. And then you've got this other end of the spectrum where now it's like we're really more focused on reducing the size of fat cells. And so it's a balancing act. If you were trying to go, like, really far on one end, the protocols just become more aggressive. So as the surplus goes up, like, we have to deprioritize some of that stuff. And maybe now we're not as restrictive of carbohydrates outside that training window. Or if we're cutting very aggressively, maybe we even have to reduce the amount of carbohydrates around that lifting and push to a more aggressive deficit, or increase the fasted cardio to a larger degree. So it really depends on the context.
Interesting. Well, I want to be respectful of your time here, so I'll just touch on a few more things, and then we can wrap up here. But Thunder Bro, I want to touch on that because I think the brand is so cool. I think your personality, and I've watched your content for years. I mean, the content is educational, it's creative, it grabs your eye. You got this big jack dude with his mohawk and this Viking luscious beard, right?
Thank you.
On social media, it grabs your attention. What was kind of the inspiration behind the brand? And then what is Thunder Bro as a whole? Like, what is the whole business? I know it's training programs and nutrition coaching and all that, but do you own, brick and mortar gyms anymore? Just kind of elaborate on all that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Thunder Bro started because I got to a point in my training career where I was pretty discouraged. Like, right before I had my back surgery, my dick was in the dirt. The wind was out of my sails. I was like, man, I didn't like the way my body looked. My body's like, my back was always kind of fucked up. I couldn't really train the way I wanted to. I didn't feel like the big version of myself anymore. And, we talked about that in the beginning, is like these vessels that allow you to feel like the big version of yourself. And one of the things that was so important to me was being able to train with intensity. And that felt like it was just getting kind of stripped away. And so, part of this transformation for me wasn't just transforming my body, but also transforming my mindset and kind of going back to my childhood heroes, the guys that I looked up to that represented that kind of aggressive positivity, of, bringing your best self and just bringing thunder, work hard,
Mm.
have fun, and bring thunder, and just kind of getting after it. And, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. So I look back at like the Ultimate Warrior, like my childhood hero. This guy had a personality like larger than life. I always loved
Uh-huh.
to emulate him. Some of the bands I used to listen to, like Metallica and Def Leppard, and just the whole culture, even like American Gladiators, the original
Yeah.
American Gladiators. I had a funny story, like, through CrossFit, I've met so many people, and I'm eternally grateful to CrossFit just for all the opportunities it's given me, and to
Mhm.
be able to be a small part of their story, which is so incredible. They're at the forefront of a whole fitness revolution
Yeah.
that has just systemically changed the whole industry. I mean, now if you go to any gym in the world, there's going to be a pull-up bar and an Olympic lifting platform and a kettlebell there, and that's because of CrossFit.
Even the
So,
YMCA.
so while I may not agree with everything they teach in terms of
Yeah.
methodology and mantra, you cannot deny their contribution to the world of fitness. And I
Mhm.
can't deny, what they've meant to me and my life and my family. I wouldn't be where I am now without CrossFit, without the people who gave us these opportunities, and so I'm eternally grateful to them.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was going to get into it, totally lost here. What was the question?
Thunderbro. Yeah, like what all does
Yeah.
Thunderbro encompass? Yeah. No, I love that.
So
Where you going with that?
so yeah, like I really wanted to oh yeah, okay. So CrossFit gave me like so many cool experiences. One of them was
Mhm.
getting to meet my childhood hero and befriend this guy, Dan Nitro Clark, who played Nitro on the original American Gladiators. They just made a movie about him
Yeah,
up on
I
Netflix.
watched the
He's
documentary on it. It was
he's a
awesome.
maniac. We hit it off instantly. I knew we were gonna hit it off instantly, but I taught his level one like back in 2015, and we stayed in touch. And
Oh, that's
we've
cool.
had kind of similar journeys. Like he had back surgery, I had back surgery. He does
Mhm.
HRT, I do HRT. Like we've kind of been and even spiritually, like going through the same evolutions as men, kind of
Yeah.
looking at yourself and figuring out how to deal with your own shit. And he's a tremendous guy. But yeah, like that's exactly who I was trying to channel when I started this brand, is like
Yeah.
being able to take that feeling and make guys like me excited to be alive and to be in the gym and to feel like there's still something to chase, there's still a
Mhm.
war to win, there's still a victory to be had, and to kind of rekindle that flame. And it's funny, like a lot of people don't know the story, but when Thunderbro started, originally what happened was I was at a CrossFit Trainer Summit, and the directors of training, Dave Castro and Nicole Carroll, asked Camille and I to make our own course.
Oh,
And this was right when I started kind of exploring hypertrophy training. And I was like, I got a great idea. We should do a CrossFit hypertrophy course. And they're like, what do you mean, like bicep curls? And I go, no, no, no. There's all this amazing physiology, methods, mechanisms, application, utility, the context, like basically everything that I teach in our hypertrophy for functional fitness seminar,
mhm.
which I created. But like I started trying to explain it to them and they didn't want to really hear it. So I said, you know what? I really can't do it justice just like talking to you guys right now. I'll write an article about it and I'll submit it to the CrossFit Journal, which CrossFit Journal is kind of like the informational index for
Yeah.
CrossFit. And at this time I was an employee of CrossFit too. So I started writing this thing, and I started conferencing with Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, who's this great mind in hypertrophy, and peeling off all the layers of diet and recovery and internal chemistry and all these different facets to it. And it became like a really long 100-page article that when I was done with it, I was like, okay, this is probably like a multiple part series. Like
Mhm.
maybe I just donate like 20 pages at a time or something like that. But I called up the CrossFit Journal and I said, the guy who was in charge, his name was like Mike Werskin. I said, hey, Mike, if I give you this article, would you guys own it? Because I've spent 6 months writing it. And they said, yeah, we would technically own it if you submitted it to us. So I didn't really
Oh,
have the confidence that they were going to allow it to even come out.
right.
So I decided, fuck that. I'm
Yeah.
going to put it out myself. And
Mhm.
so I turned it into an ebook, hypertrophy for functional fitness, the original kind of mantra of like,
Mhm.
why would you do something like this? How can you do it? What's the purpose, the scope? How do you execute all these things?
Yeah.
And that was our first product on the Thunderbro website. And along with that, you know, like one of the things that I kind of explored in parallel was just this whole idea of like functional medicine and human optimization and regenerative therapies. And I was really into supplements that can improve your chemistry and hormone production.
Yeah.
So I was taking like all kinds of herbs like Tonga Ali and D-aspartic acid and ashwagandha and heavy D3, like before it was even known or popular. I
I
was
was right
like
there with
dosing
you.
this stuff out
Yeah.
crazy. And I thought like, you know, it would be really cool to take all these supplements and put it into coffee because I love drinking coffee. And I was like, instead of taking all these pills, I could just drink it while I lift, and we could
Yeah.
call it Thunderbro coffee with 2 lightning bolts, right? So that was like one of the original products
Oh,
was
that's
supposed to be
cool.
Thunderbro coffee.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, while we were making the website, Shopify shut us down because they saw testosterone boosting coffee and they're like, oh no, you can't do that. So we had to like completely redo the website. We didn't put the coffee up, and we just had the book, like the Hypertrophy for Functional Fitness book, and a program that I wrote, which was my initial program coming off of back surgery, which is our first 90-day Get Huge program.
Oh, that's
And that book eventually, I'm trying to look around, I think I know another copy of one of them. That book eventually turned into the sequel. So like the 90 Day Get Huge program reloaded now
I
is
love
the
it.
new version of it, but it's the basic progression of how to start. If you're an athlete who, like, let's say you're injured and
Yeah.
you can't lift. That was the thing that I was trying to navigate, was like the surgeons were like, you can't lift heavy. And I was like, okay, well, how do I get stronger and bigger? I can't lift heavy. That was the program that we created for it. So it was something Brad and I worked on, and it was really cool.
Oh,
Also,
cool.
our original partner, Andrew Charlesworth, who started Thunderbro with me, helped us
That
all come
name
up.
sounds familiar.
Oh yeah, he's awesome. He's the head of like Midwest affiliates now.
Yeah,
He owns
I
a couple
talked to him the
gyms.
other like last month or something like that,
Yeah,
because he's been trying
Andrew's
to get us
great.
to reaffiliate. Oh, that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's funny.
he's a great dude. And you know, when I started
Yeah.
this, it was kind of like a side hobby. And it's like, man, I don't know anything about running a business like this. And Andrew had a vernacular and he was really into the training too. So we kind of partnered up to get this thing launched.
Oh, that's
And I remember when we launched the website, it was on a Friday. I was so nervous that we were going to lose our money because like Andrew owned his gym and he's a young family, and you know, I was mortgage, and we both put like $2,500 in to like get the website done and make some t-shirts and print some books. And we made our money back in the first 30 minutes. And I was like, holy shit, there is
yeah.
a voracious appetite for this stuff out there.
Wow.
You know, I think what we're talking about is really resonating with people that know us and who've gone through the same thing. You know, guys are like, yo, I just don't know what to do. Like, I'm kind of discouraged. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm feeling banged up. I love CrossFit, but it's hard for me to acknowledge that it's just not for me anymore, at least the way that I know it. And from there, it's been like a whirlwind journey, man. It's been nuts.
Cool.
We're at the point where now we have thousands of athletes in Muscle Anarchy. We've sold, you know, 100,000 of these books. Like it's been crazy. And we're
I'm
trying
buying
to,
one of those books when we get off here. By the way, I saw
yeah. Well,
the
listen,
Hypertrophy Bible.
I'll give you a code. And if anyone out there is listening, if you go to thunderbro.com and click on Muscle Anarchy, use the code GETTHUNDER, GETTHUNDR. There's no E in Thunder because it's like Thun Dr. Bro. But use that code, okay, GETTHUNDR, and you can try a free month of Muscle Anarchy and just get a sample for it. And I think most people, they, you know, even if you're kind of, a lot of people in our program are also coaches and gym owners who are kind of getting ideas from the program. We're like, yo, I'm going to take this finisher, I'm going to incorporate it after my class, or I'm going to give my affiliate a hypertrophy day once a week or something like that, just to kind of mix it in. And we've even started doing stuff with affiliates where now we have an affiliate program where we provide affiliates with a hypertrophy training template that they can overlap on top of their own CrossFit training. If they want to run a hypertrophy cycle for like a 12-week period, we give them their Muscle Anarchy affiliates package where we give them like the programming, the instructions, the timelines, the coaching notes, and they can start to incorporate this stuff all under their roof. I'm looking forward to the future now. We're going to be launching educational courses. So we're going to have our shredded fat loss course, our
Mhm.
hypertrophy for functional fitness course now, not just in person, but also through online training modules, and our course on gaining muscle mass. And all of that is going to be stuff where you can just kind of follow it on your own off the website and be able to go through modules and, learn all the information. My
Oh,
goal is
that's
just to get
awesome.
this stuff into gyms, because I
Yeah.
feel like as a gym owner, you want to provide value to your members. Like if they want something, you want to
Mhm.
be able to serve their needs. But sometimes that means sometimes outsourcing or even just picking up new skills. So we
Yeah.
want to be the way that they're able to kind of introduce this stuff.
It's cool because there's an abundance mindset to that, right? Like I have no problem partnering with the right people to learn new skills, and bring new ideas in. I think that's part of the reason I look at a ton of different stuff still. I look at, people I used to follow for strongman and powerlifting and bodybuilding, and I think all of it, what's so cool about it is all of it incorporates into the CrossFit methodology in some way, shape, or form. But it's looking at it and going, okay, what are my specific goals, and what would I like to see out of this training? Because as you said, not everybody's trying to go to the CrossFit Games. Not everybody's trying to do that, but maybe wants to look sexy with their shirt off. And so I think that you bring something like that in. And I look at it, for me, it's like, it's been a long time since I've done any sort of bodybuilding or hypertrophy training, and so it's an exercise, it's a muscle you need to exercise, otherwise you kind of lose that knowledge, right? And there's also new things that people have learned, new science that's come out since I did it 10 years ago. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
think there's so many great people to follow out there.
mhm,
And I would look at, like, there's always that new hot thing on the block,
yeah.
right? That new diet or new training, the influencer or whatever. And like, that's fine. It's good to expose yourself to new ideas, but I would encourage people, like, look at the people who have been doing this successfully
Mhm,
for a very long time, because they understand something that you can't just click, it's no easy pill.
right.
And you can usually absorb the most from them. And a lot of that too is like, some of the OG CrossFit stuff is fantastic. Some of the old traditional strength and conditioning stuff, content. There's a website called T Nation that I grew up with, and a
Oh,
lot of the
I
contributors
yeah,
there,
love that
like
website.
Christian Thibodeau, I mentioned Jason Brown, like he's got another really
Mhm,
great conjugate conditioning program. Like, I think that there's a lot of kind of cool people to leverage and take a look at. And when you're evaluating a training program or a method, I certainly am flattered by the comments like, Dave, you look great. How are you doing it? And,
right.
that's fine. But I would encourage people, when you're looking at training programs, don't just look at the person who's writing it. Like, they could be genetically gifted. They could be doing X, Y, or Z. Like, they might not even be doing the program. But look at the athletes, like, look at the results, because when you see someone who's able to produce breadth and depth of results, meaning they're
Mhm,
affecting a lot of people in a powerful way, they've got something cool going on. And
mhm.
so I would, like, I always tell folks, I'm like, you don't look at Greg Glassman to evaluate CrossFit, right? You look at the CrossFitters that are able to do all this stuff. So,
Exactly.
I love doing my program. I love getting on stage and competing, but I would not use my aesthetic or my personal experience as the sole evaluator for the program. Go check online, check out the before and
Mhm.
afters, take a look at the program and give it a shot. And I think that ultimately is going to hold a lot more weight, because that's what most influencers on Instagram and TikTok are doing. They're just like showing their abs, buy my program, and you're like, congratulations, I got a piece of shit in a box.
Well, I
Yeah,
think what separates you is there's actual knowledge behind it. You have a lot of knowledge on this stuff, and you're obviously passionate about it. And it's not just the looks. You understand the science, you understand the knowledge. You've been in it for a long time, just as you said. I think that's something that is a testament to your profession, which
well, I
is
really appreciate it. Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. I'm trying. I tell Cami that I wake up every morning just praying that I'm not full of shit.
I think we all do a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you mentioned your wife Cammy. She's a badass too.
Oh, she's incredible. And Cam has had a very similar journey to me. Like, her company Feroce has followed in suit of Thunderbro. Like, she blends form and function together. She got hurt doing CrossFit, loves to train intensely, wants to focus on aesthetics, and so a lot of what we do, she delivers in a slightly different way though. I think Cami delivers it in a much more accessible way for, like, people to maybe you don't have as high of a training vernacular to like just get access and work in their homes. Here, this is Zoe. Is he saying Zoe?
What's up, Zoe?
Whoa. Hey, hello. Yogo.
Another guest on the show
Yeah,
today.
if you guys
Love
are
it.
out there, and Camille is amazing at helping ladies with their hormones too, because
cool.
of not just her personal experience, but also a lot of the experience. Her wheelhouse is in helping women who are, you know, that have had a baby or that are going through, you know, pre or perimenopause, navigate that stuff and figure out the diet and the training to help them kind of turn the corner and find a way to win again.
That's very cool. Yeah, there's geez, we could probably talk. Well, we may have to make a whole other episode with you about this kind of stuff. But the HRT side, you know,
Oh yeah, that's really fun, exciting stuff. And I think there's
Mhm.
also a lot of misinformation and stigma around it. And
Oh yeah,
I'm constantly answering questions with athletes on it, and you know, not just giving them an idea and a context for it, but a lot of times it's doing actual like medical advocacy of like what to talk to your doctor about, how to find the right provider, how to, you know, understand how to manage yourself, because there's not just HRT, there's so many really impressive technologies that are emerging that are becoming more and more mainstream that used to be exclusively reserved for like Hollywood actors or
yeah.
people with like, you know, zillions and zillions of dollars that can afford. Now it's actually accessible to the layman. It's more well studied. It's generally done much safer. And I think people, again, are understanding the context and utility of this. If you're someone who wants to thrive, not just survive, it's definitely a component that you want to at least look at and consider.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's so many things out there now that hinder hormone production in
Yep.
many ways, and you can't control them all. You know, it sucks. You know, I looked at that myself. You know, and it's like, man, I just can't control everything. I can't control necessarily the amount of sleep I'm getting or the quality of sleep I'm getting every night. There's things I can do to make that better, but you know, I can't help it if my 8-year-old wants to wake up in the middle of the night and come in and turn my lights on at 2 a.m.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, you know, for a lot of folks, you have to think about this like a hierarchy, right? Like, where does this stuff kind of fit in? And the foundation of, you know, of all of this is going to be training, nutrition, and lifestyle. Like,
Right.
if your training, nutrition, and lifestyle is not dialed, it doesn't make sense for you to start worrying about supplements and HRT and peptides and all that stuff yet.
Right.
Get this shit straight, because now you'll be able to build a big, strong, sturdy house. But if those things are off, like, you can't out drug a bad diet and lifestyle, you know, you're just going to kind of set yourself up for failure, disappointment, or even worse, injury. So like, I think that people need to understand the context and utility, and also go into it with an open mind, because I think it's an emotionally charged subject because of the nature of, you know, PEDs and anabolics and the way we were taught through media about what it is and who it's for. I think that's all changing slowly.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I we'll have to do an episode too and talk more in depth about that, because I think there's a whole episode to unpack there for sure.
Well, you just let me know. I'm ready to rock.
Love it, man. Well, you know, one more question I have for you is, what legacy do you want to leave?
Oh, well, it's a legacy podcast. I mean,
Yeah,
oh,
loaded question, I know, but
no, I mean, I think that we're lucky that we've grown a pretty cool business, and a lot of times we'll have people come in as like managing partners or this and that get really excited about dollars. They're
yeah,
like, oh, you can make this much money and yada yada. But for me, the bottom line is the impact we can have on people. Say hello. I think if we can, you know, leave Thunder Bro as the kind of thing that has affected a lot of people in a powerful way and has really been a valuable thing to improve their lives or provide them a community, or just give to it what it's given to me, like that confidence, that feeling of like, I'm excited to be here and to be doing this again. To me, that's what we have to contribute, you know. And I think that every day we're working hard to achieve it. But when I focus on that, everything else kind of fades away. I don't worry about the finances or the money or where we're at or how many athletes we have. Just focus on like doing a really good job with each athlete and making sure that they're getting something here that they can't get anywhere else, and we're providing them with a unique and valuable training experience that actually improves their life. That's number one.
following through with your God-given purpose, you know. That's awesome, man.
Go.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Dave Lipson, everybody, thanks for coming on today. It was a great conversation. We'll do this again.
Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate it.